Hello. So here we are, still at the vicarage in week 8 of isolation. But at least we can now go for a walk with a friend or a family member, which is nice, just to make some human contact outside of our family. We're still travelling to Kent 2 to 3 times a week to clear Kevin's mum's house, and today we're meeting with the builder about some much needed renovation to upgrade the house from 1956. There is still a turquoise bathroom and electrical wiring from the Dark Ages. Today I'm going to be concluding the end of John Mark Comer's book, which I highly recommend, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and this particular chapter is on the subject of living a simpler life with less clutter in our lives. And this for me is so relevant as we clear out Kevin's parents' house, where nothing has been thrown away for 64 years. In 1 Tim 6-8 it says, "A devout life does bring wealth, but it's the rich simplicity of being yourself before God. Since we entered the world penniless, and we will leave it penniless, if we have bread on our table and shoes on our feet, clothes on our back, that should be enough." Verse 10 says, "Lust for money brings trouble, and nothing but trouble." Going down that path, some lose their footing in the faith completely and live to regret it bitterly ever after. In verse 17, it tells us, "Tell those rich in these world's wealth to quit being so full of themselves and so obsessed with money, which is here today and gone tomorrow. Tell them to go after God, who piles on all the riches we could ever imagine. To do good, to be rich, in helping others, to be extravagantly generous. If they do that, they'll build a treasury that will last, gaining life that is truly life." The thing today is that what we have defines who we are in this life. And coming from an interior design background, I know only too well the importance of having the right colour scheme in this season, the latest material, and the best furniture around. But what Timothy is saying, live simply and don't worry about those things. Just pursue God. You might be wealthy part of your life and lose it all the next. But if you go after God, your whole perspective will change and you'll want to help others and give away things, as it feels so much better to give and bless others. Interestingly, I've just checked the news and the new rich musician list has come out with the top earner having £800 million. That person could really help a lot of people in the world to make a difference. I've just finished John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but his penultimate chapter was on simplicity. And he says, if we want to live a life of simplicity, then we need to refocus, not on how we can succeed, but how can we help the poor. In order to create more simplicity in our life, we need to declutter our lives. But what does that look like? So he quotes various decluttering gurus. One of them says, anything that does not add value to your life, that's just sitting around gathering dust. For 2, anything that does not speak joy, things that you keep meaning to get rid of and causes you anxiety when you walk past it and is on your to-do list, just get rid of it. And 3, too much stuff in too small a space, anything that leads to a feeling of disorganization. This just makes sense and it's very practical. The goal here is to live with a high degree of intentionality around what matters most, which for those of us who apprentice under Jesus is Jesus himself and his kingdom. As most of you know, Kevin's mum has recently gone into a home, and that means we need to clear her home and renovate it and rent it out to pay for her care. It's a 3-bedroom semi-detached house with so much stuff in it you can hardly move. They moved in 1956 and have kept everything from that day onward. There is so much stuff. And when we had finished clearing the house, the loft had exactly the same amount of stuff all over again, because they could never throw anything out. Ever. Oh. It took Kevin 4 days to clear out the smallest bedroom. And this is where they stored everything to start with before they moved into the next bedroom. It was mainly his father's stuff, and he found 20 door handles still in their original packaging, way back to 1970. 10 different Bosch electrical tools still in their original boxes, and door locks. Loads of door locks. Lots of useful tools which have never been opened, and we weren't sure what they were used for anyway. But you never know when you might need it. So in the meantime, I emptied the main bedroom where his mum was sleeping, which housed the airing cupboard. And while there was enough bedding, there was enough bedding to make up 50 beds. She had kept every single sheet and duvet from 1960. It'll be a great blessing for Hope for Havering for their shelter. But at the bottom of the 2 wardrobes she had, she'd also kept every single Christmas Smellies gift set anybody had ever given her over the years too. She hadn't enjoyed them. She just left them and hoarded them away. And I felt it was really sad that she really could never enjoy anything that she was given. She just put them all away at the bottom of the wardrobe. Over the 3 bedrooms, there were 6 wardrobes, which were all full with clothes. And they were just his mum's clothes because we got rid of his dad's clothes. And in the loft were the rest of the clothes they'd worn from 1960. I should think Hope for Havering will be able to start their own vintage section soon after all this. When all the wardrobes were emptied and removed, and the house suddenly seemed so much bigger, and you could almost imagine the house going, oh, thank goodness for that, I can breathe. It was interesting from the point of view that we could say, do you remember this in the 70s? And Kevin found so many memories and old toys and things that had been kept that it was nice for him to reminisce. But if you had seen how his mother struggled to maneuver around the furniture and the storage, you would say, why didn't you do this sooner? But unfortunately, she never would let us. She became so anxious if we ever suggested throwing anything away. She just couldn't cope. So reading Simplicity and emptying Kevin's parents' house, I began to take a look at my own stuff that I'd accumulated and thought, while I have this time, I might also throw some things out too. Unlike John Mark Comer, who has thrown out all his clothes except for 6 matching outfits, I just got rid of all my clothes that I didn't wear anymore and that I'd been holding on to just in case. Books that just sit on the bookshelf and never read again. And so it would be great to send them off to Hope for Havering for someone else to enjoy. Jesus lived a simple life and had the freedom to move from house to house, town after town, because he didn't have his own place. Although I guess he must have stored some of his carpentry tools back at his mother's home, and he would have earned some money from the trade as a carpenter. His life was very simple though, and he could just focus on his ministry as there were no responsibility of having a home. People always offered him a place to stay, and it was a very different culture to here in the Western world. Sometimes though, I think we can get so bogged down with the chores in our homes and the bills that need paying that it can be just such a huge burden and distract us from what's important. John Mark Comer goes on to suggest some principles we might try and live by, and I've changed them slightly to make them more UK friendly. So number 1, before you buy something, ask yourself, what is the time cost of this item? Can we actually afford it, and will it need maintenance? I wish I'd have prayed this prayer before I got 2 dogs. They're very high maintenance. Number 2, before you buy, ask yourself, by buying this, am I oppressing the poor or harming the earth? Well, I must say, I always check where a product is made, either food or goods, and opt for things made in this country if I possibly can. Then it won't have to be travelled from one country to another. It might be a bit more expensive, but I'd rather have one thing that's good than a lot of cheap stuff. Because cheap may have been made by child labour in a third world country. Number 3, never impulse buy. When you see an item you want, just sit on it for a while. The larger the item, the longer you wait. Pray about it. Remember, God isn't against stuff. He made the world for us to enjoy and it's beautiful. But if a purchase doesn't have his blessing on it, do you really want it in your life? And I know I've made that mistake myself and ended up in the end giving it away because I didn't need it. Number 4, when you buy, opt for fewer, better things. William Morris, the great material designer, quoted, "Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful." How can we live with less? Number 5, when you can, borrow and share instead of buying. Number 6, get into the habit of giving things away. It is more blessed to give than to receive, it says. If you want a more blessed life, then give more generously and regularly. Live by a budget. That's number 7, by the way. Then you know what you have to spend after all the bills have been paid. Number 8, learn to enjoy things without owning them. Number 9, cultivate a deep appreciation for creation, something that I think is happening more during this time of isolation. Number 10, cultivate a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures, a walk in the park, a chat with a friend, a meal with a family. Of course, when we can do that all again, and won't we appreciate it? Ecclesiastes says, a person can do nothing better than eat and drink and find satisfaction in what they've won through toil. Number 11, recognize advertising for what it is, propaganda, to make you buy. It's always a lie. So next time you see an advert and you're tempted, look at it and see what they're doing to convince you to buy. It's bound to be a lie. And number 12, lead a cheerful, happy revolt against the spirit of materialism. Less is better. John Mark Comer quotes, "It's wise to regularly deny yourselves from getting what we want, whether through a practice as intense as fasting or as minor as picking the longest queue at the till in the supermarket. That way, when somebody else denies us from getting what we want, we don't respond with anger. We are already acclimatized. We don't have to get our own way to be happy. Naturally, this takes a while for most of us, so start small and choose a semi-long queue in the supermarket." Thinking further about the queue in the supermarket, having to queue to actually get in the supermarket at the moment often takes up to 30 minutes. But it can be a great opportunity to pray and ask God what he wants to do, or does he want you to make contact with someone in the queue? I'm not very good at starting up a conversation. I don't find it easy. But the other day I did have a mum in front of me who was so grumpy with her children. Now I know she was probably stressed and had enough of them, and I've certainly been grumpy at times with my children, but it just made me so sad. They were about 3 and 4 and they were fed up in the queue and it was late and they were probably hungry and tired. So I began to pray because it reminded me of my grandchildren and how I miss them so much. And I wondered if she had any support. And I kept praying. And as I kept the praying up for about, I don't know, probably 5 or 10 minutes. And in fact, I probably got distracted and then came back to watch the mother again. And I noticed that her whole persona had actually changed. And she was beginning to interact with her girls. And she picked one up and gave her a hug and a kiss. And she was so much different. And I thought, wow, gosh, this prayer works. I must try doing this more often. So I think, God really wants to work in people's lives and he loves answering prayers. So we do need to be more intentional and And as you slow down and have a simpler life, you notice things more and you don't rush. So this week's challenge, I feel, is next time you find yourself waiting in the queue at the supermarket or just waiting for something, use your time wisely. Don't get your phone out. Just look around and see who you can pray for or what you can pray for. See what moves you, what stirs your heart and gets your attention. And then start praying for that person and see what God wants to do. Have a good week and many blessings.